Hello, I am Robert L. Patterson, minister for the North Little Rock Church of Christ, located at 1708 Highway 161, North Little Rock, Arkansas. If this is your first time viewing our videos, please click subscribe. The subject for today is godly unmarried people. Godly unmarried people. Godly unmarried people are Christians who are not married and love God. The unmarried people are people that are Christians who are not married and love God. In 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verses 1 and 2, Paul wrote to the church at Corinth. Paul said, "Now concerning the things whereof he wrote unto me, it is good for a man not to touch a woman. Nevertheless, to avoid fornication, let every man have his own wife, and let every woman have her own husband." This kind of lesson is kind of crucial, or they're very important, because we need to see what Paul is teaching the Church of Christ and God's people. Paul said, y'all wrote a letter to me, and now he's answering it back to them. And he told them it is good for a man not to touch a woman. You see how he specified that a man must not touch a woman. Nevertheless, to avoid sexual intercourse, he said, let every man have his own wife, and let every woman have her own husband. Now keep in mind how you identify it, that if you're going to have a sexual intercourse with somebody, let it be your own husband or your own wife. And that means husband man, wife woman. And that's how God did it in the Garden of Eden. In 1 Corinthians 7:34, Paul said, there is difference also between a wife and a virgin. The unmarried woman cares for the things of the Lord, that she may be holy, both in body and in spirit. But she that is married cares for the things of the world, how she may please her husband. Now, if you keep in mind of the verses that teach out those older women how to raise their daughters, these women are taught to love their husbands. Now, notice what Paul said. There is a difference between a wife and a virgin. And I pray to God that all of us that have children, man or woman children, if they're girl or boys, teach them that what their genders are, and teach them what the responsibility they have toward God when they come down to having a spouse in this life. So Paul said, teach them that there's a difference between a wife and a virgin. The unmarried woman cares for the things of the Lord. If we could get all of our unmarried daughters in the world today to focus their lives on doing things that the Lord would have them to do, then that would take their mind away from the things that the devil is trying to entice them to do. The Bible said that she may be holy, both in body, so her body need to be holy, and in her spirit, her mind or her spiritual life is supposed to be holy. We're supposed to be teaching our girls and boys how to live and keep themselves right in the sight of God. But in that same verse, Paul said, but she that is married care for the things of the world, how she may please her husband. Again, a man and woman that's married to each other, they do things, she do things to please him. And I have always asked, how is a gospel preacher wife pleasing him when he goes to one church of Christ to preach the gospel and his wife goes someplace else? I've had a problem with that for a very long time. In 1 Corinthians 7, verses 36 through 38, Paul said, but if any man think that he behaves himself uncomely toward his virgin, if she pass the flower of her age and need to require, let him do what he will, he sinneth not, let them marry. They was having conversations about men letting their daughters get married at certain ages. And then Paul is telling the people at Corinth again that if your daughter is old enough and she has the capabilities to be married, and she has somebody they want to get married with, he said, let them marry. That's in verse 36. Now look at verse 38. The Bible said, nevertheless, he that standeth steadfast in his heart, having no need, but have power over his own will, and has so desired in his heart, that he will keep his virgin doeth well. So there's another case, Paul is saying, that this man got a daughter, but she just not adequate. And that to me is like when you study and you find that there are some children in the world that don't know how to take care of children. They don't know how to take care of a husband. So if you have a daughter and you know that she's not capable of doing that, taking care of her own children, taking care of her husband, taking care of her home, then Paul is saying that man have a right, if he so desire, to keep his virgin. The Bible says he doeth well. In verse 38, the Bible says, so then he that giveth her in marriage doeth well, but he that giveth her not in marriage doeth better. So it's showing us that these two cases were the virgins. One was adequate. One understood how to love her husband. She understood how to raise her children. She understood how to take care of her family. And she understood how to not get involved with these affairs of life. That woman was capable of being married. The woman that could not understand those things and just did not understand how to raise children, did not understand how to love her husband, didn't understand how to take care of a house, that man that kept his daughter and taught her, you're not ready yet for marriage life. The Bible said that man did better, because who wants to give their wife to somebody and you got to raise their children? And there are a lot of Church of Christ children that bring in children to grandmama and grandpapa to take care of them because they were not capable to take care of their own family, the manner that Paul said teach them to do. In 1 Timothy chapter 5, verse 11 and 12, the Bible said, but the young widows refuse, for when they have began to wax wanting against Christ, they will marry. Even when Paul talked about the widows in the church, there was that one type of widow that I call the third type, which is the young women that lost their husbands. Paul taught Timothy, you take them young widows and you use them in the same category as unmarried virgins. Teach them young women to marry. They've been involved with marriage life and they're going to want to get married because they're young. Paul said when they go wanting against Christ, what they mean is they pretended to want to be a widow indeed, but they could not. So Paul said when they get the sexual drive getting acting up, they're going to go against Christ. They will sin, which means they will marry. The Bible said in verse 12, having damnation, because they have cast off their first faith. Their first faith was they're going to be widows in the church. They're going to live a celibate life without having sex with anybody else. And Paul said that's not the case. They've been married before. So you get these women together and you do not receive them into the number as the widows indeed, and teach them to marry. God does not want unmarried people to live together as husband and wives, nor to be involved in any sexual activities with anyone. That's God's will. If a person is unmarried, they have no right to be shacked up, having babies out of wedlock. Those are things that God has taught against forever. So we need to teach our children, don't go out there and get some other girl pregnant. And don't go out there and get pregnant by some man. Learn that you're going to love these people, get to know them, and teach them the way God said do it. And all you can, keep them away from sexual activities. In Matthew chapter 25, verses 1 and 2, the Lord said, then shall the King of heaven be likened unto the virgins. Now notice this, likened unto 10 virgins, which took their lamps and went forth to meet the bridegroom. And 5 of them was wise, and 5 were foolish. When we take a real good look at how we're raising our children in this world today, especially this case about virgins, we need to have our virgins set and ready to marry the right person when they come along. We need to teach our girls, because there are some virgins, but they're not wise. And there are virgins that's real foolish. A wise virgin, she don't want to go out and shack up with somebody and have children by them out of wedlock because she's wise. But foolish virgins, they would go out and not only have one child by the person, but sometimes multiple children by multiple men. That is the foolish virgins. But even in that, if we could just get our girls and to sit down and listen to the family, they can be forgiven for those sins. So even though they got caught up in a situation where they was not wise, they acted so foolish, but yet still God had made a way to save those people. In Proverbs chapter 6 and verse 32 and 33, the Bible said, "But whoso committeth adultery with a woman lacketh understanding. He that doeth it destroys his own soul." So when our young men living with these girls and young women and older women and having sexual intercourse with those people, those young men have damaged their souls. And our job is to try to save our young men and young women from going to hell. So we need to work on them. When they start shacking up, plead with them to don't do that. Plead with them. This is not the way God would have it. Plead with them to get faithful with God. In verse 33, the Bible says, "A wound and dishonor shall he get, and his reproaches shall not be wiped away." Those things that they've done in their life, God is not going to wipe it away. He will forgive them, but they got to stop doing those sins in order to please God. In 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verses 1, 2, and 3, Paul said, "I would to God that you could bear with me a little in my folly. And indeed, bear with me. For I am jealous over you with godly jealousy. For I have espoused you to one husband, that I may present you as a chaste virgin to Christ." Paul was pleading to the church at Corinth, trying to tell them, when I got y'all saved, I offered y'all to Christ. And he wanted them to stay with just that one body, that one church, stay with the Lord. He said, "But I fear," in verse 3, "but I fear lest by any means, as the serpent beguiled Eve through his subtlety or through his smartness, so your minds should be corrupted from the simplicity that is in Christ." If we don't teach our girls and our young men that the devil is out there, and use the example of how he did Eve, show him how that these things can entice you to do things that is contrary to God's will. In Hebrews 13:4 again, the Bible said, "Marriage is honorable in all, and the bed undefiled. But whoremongers and adulterers God will judge." Hebrews 13:4 is a verse we should learn to teach our children and teach ourselves, because God's going to judge those that do these things wrongly. Finally, in Proverbs chapter 18:22, the Bible says, "Whoso findeth a wife." Now keep in mind, he didn't say what woman found a husband. So women, a lot of women try to find husbands. But Solomon said, "Whoso findeth a wife findeth a good thing and favor of the Lord." So let's teach our girls, let a good man, a godly man, find you, and then you would have obtained favor of the Lord. Thank you for viewing our videos. And will you please help us to spread the gospel of Christ by telling your family and your friends to view our videos and subscribe? Thank you.